feel your imagination run wild across these vast landscapes, and you can't do anything but photograph it and draw it, because you have to preserve it. This is how I felt about nature. I loved it. It was my greatest passion. I would suppose many of you know me as Beatrix Potter, the author. Now, though, I am quick to correct you that I am Beatrix Potter. I died in Vancouver. And I suppose that my love of nature began at an early age. I was born in 1866 in London to Helen and Rupert Potter. My mother was very controlling of me, and I spent most of my childhood secluded. I really didn't have any friends until my brother Bertrand was born when I was 6. When my life lacked socially, my mother overcompensated in education. I was an excellent student of languages and science and art. I was mostly cared for by nannies and governesses, and I lived at home until I was 39. My brother and I collected animals, pretty much anything we could get our hands on. My favorite, though, were 2 rabbits named Benjamin Bouncer and Peter Piper. They later became the rabbits in my book. My favorite time of the year, though, was our annual vacation. We would travel up to Lake District and rent a house for several weeks and stay there. And it was a time to get away from my old house and just be in nature. It was here that I fell in love with my favorite place. We went to Old Soury, and I instantly knew that this was my favorite place in the whole earth. And I would later live there. I drew many landscapes, and I always brought my rabbits with me when we went up there. And I drew all the landscapes around the entire area, and many of these were put into my book. The idea from the book came from an old governess of mine. Her son caught ill, and I wrote him a letter, and for lack of a better subject, I wrote about 4 rabbits, named Flopsy, Mopsy, Cottontail, and Peter. My governess had the idea to make a book, and I thought this was a wonderful idea. It would bring my own income, it would be a sense of independence for me, and I would do something useful with my life. I borrowed the letter back from her son and expanded it, added more pictures, and sent the manuscript off to 6 publishers. Unfortunately, all 6 returned rejection letters, the kindest of which, though, came from Beatrix Potter & Co. This is why I chose them to resend my manuscript to. Mr. Ronsley, a man who had always supported my art, rewrote the book, and I have to tell you, it was horrible. The writing scheme was just bad, and I appreciated his efforts, but it was just bad. But because of his interest in my book, Beatrix Potter & Co. found interest in me. But this time, they asked for my manuscript. So I sent it to them, and they told me the changes I needed to make, and though I didn't want to make most of them, I consented, because I figured they would know more about publishing than me. And my first book was published. This book started my relationship with Norman Warren. He was the youngest brother of the Frederick Warren & Co. company. He dealt with me in my book and helped me edit it, and, well, we developed a friendship. My mother was not happy, and let me tell you a story about my mother. She thought we were a higher class in society, that those who worked for their money were below us, not worthy of us, that we shouldn't even talk to them. I never understood this. We inherited our money from men who worked for it. Those men in trade that she thought were worse than us, that's where we came from. And as my friendship with Norman Warren developed and soon became more than that, she got more and more anxious about it. And one day, he proposed. She was furious. I was allowed to wear his ring, but she told me basically that we would never get married. And unfortunately, she got her wish. Norman died a month after he proposed. And ever since, I've worn his ring as to never forget him. And I was devastated. My happily ever ending had been ripped from me. My My mother was in control of my life, and I was sick of it. I gathered the money from my book, and I bought a farm in Sorry, that land I'd fallen in love with so long ago. Once again, my mother was furious. It seemed that there was this war going on between us that lasted until she died. But I didn't care. This was something for me. This was my life, and I wanted to do what I wanted with it. Unfortunately, when I bought Hilltop, I spent about twice as much as it was worth. It was poor research on my part, and didn't really dampen my joy. I owned my own property, and that was exciting. But to avoid this mistake, I hired a solicitor. His name was William Felix. And this began our relationship. We became friends because he'd helped me buy other farms. It was my passion to preserve this district that I loved. And so I began to buy more farms and more animals and to preserve the nature that was so important. William and I talked, and he resembled Martin in so many ways. He was kind and loving and just encouraging and soft-spoken. We didn't share a love of art as Norm and I had, but what we did share was a love of nature. And I guess this is probably what attracted me to him first. And soon, our friendship grew, and he proposed. And my mother was furious. So I went home and I tried to talk her into it. This was my life, and this is what I wanted to do. She didn't relent. This bowery time, I got iller and sicker and poor of health. And I was struggling to hang on. And then my brother Bertrand came home and saved me. He had been married secretly for 11 years. And none of us had known because he was so scared of my mother. Needless to say, my parents were shocked. But it gave no consent for my marriage. And William and I were married. It was a private affair, just like my life had been. I never wanted to be a celebrity or any of that. We were married and we lived happily. When I first came to Sorry, the people thought of me as the city girl who was making a fool of herself in the country. But they soon came to find that I was very intuitive in my farming. I knew what I was doing, and I'd say it came from good blood. I came from good stock. I was also a great threat to the National Trust, who also worked to preserve the district. I told them that I would give them my land and my will when I died, and I never quite grew above threatening to withdraw it. Anytime they didn't do what I wanted them to, I brought that threat out. People also found my books amusing. I wrote many after Peter Rabbit, and children still love them today, still read them, and from what I hear, I even have my own website, whatever that is. I'm proud of my life. I'm proud of what I did. I took what I loved, and I did something great with it. And so, what I hope that you gain from this time is perhaps you'll take what you love, and you will do something great with it.
Well, if you could change anything during your lifetime, what would it be and why?
If I had to choose one thing to change, I think I would have stood up to my mother more. She was so controlling and just constantly telling me what to do, and I was never what she wanted and never lived up to her standards. And I think if at an earlier age I had said, no, this is my life and I'm going to do what I want with it, that maybe the war wouldn't have ensued, and maybe I wouldn't have been as sick all the time. And it wouldn't have taken me until I married William to finally be free.